Hello and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It's another Saturday. It's Saturday, August 29th. I mean, the month has just flown by. We are almost in September. Summer's almost over, but we are still in a mess. COVID-19 continues to rage. We still have a crazy person in the White House. The election is getting ready to take off in earnest for President of the United States and a lot of other races. And another black man is shot, and this time in the back 7 times. Doesn't matter what precipitated the event. I think what's obvious from the video is that shooting him in the back was not necessary, but we're again at some more protests. Yesterday in Washington, Al Sharpton and Martin Luther King III led a anniversary march of the March on Washington, which was 57 years ago. Also yesterday was the 65th anniversary of the murder of Emmett Till. So 65 years is not a long time. The world's been around for millions of years, and we're only 65 years from the murder of Emmett Till. So today we want to talk about all of that and a lot more. As always, we have our resident political science expert, Val Atkinson, in to talk with us. We'll bring him in just a minute. We also have a special guest today, Dr. Nicole McFarlane, who teaches at Fayetteville State University. She's in the English department, previously at Clemson University, also taught at Guilford College and a number of other places. We're gonna have her in today too to try to help us make sense of what's going on in the world in a senseless world. But let me quit talking. Let me go ahead and introduce the panel for today, Dr. Nicole McFarlane and Val Atkinson. Welcome to The Deal.
Thank you, Ed. Good being here.
Well, Val, I want to start with you, and we'll bring Dr. McFarlane in. One of the things that I've been really concerned about is how this election is going to go. We know that the president has been trying to do everything he can to muddy the waters. He keeps talking about that the only way he can lose is that the election is going to be fixed or rigged. So he started trying to do things to the Postal Service, right? He installs one of his own minions into the Postal Service, a person who's actually from Greensboro, Louis DeJoy. Into the Postal Service as the postmaster and starts monkeying around there. He's talked about how mail-in voting is not a good thing. And we've talked about it a good bit here, that there's plenty of ways to vote to ensure that your vote's counted. But this whole thing that the elections are going to be somehow unfair if he doesn't win. Let's start there. We're 68 days out, which is also incredible. That we've made it through almost 4 years with this clown. But talk to me about where we are in terms of how safe you think this election is going to be. Are we going to be back in Florida 2000 with the Bush Gore, or can we pull this election off?
Well, that's a possibility that we could see a repeat of 2000, where the Supreme Court had to make the decision. I call it the Supreme Court selection. They selected George Bush to be the 43rd president of the United States. It could happen. No one knows because we haven't had it to happen before. The last 2 presidents who were incumbents and were not asked to come back for a second term, George H.W. Bush and Jimmy Carter, they peaceably left and went on about their ways. But we have never had a circumstance where the incumbent decides that the election was not legal, it was not sound, and he's going to investigate or he's going to do whatever until it is fixed. And we can look at the Constitution, and we know that the 12th Amendment talks about on the 20th of September, the 20th of January, there will be an oath taken and so forth. If you go behind the curtains, you find that the Mayflower moving van doesn't ride up to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue at 12:30 p.m. You know, these things happen a day or so before in coordination with and with the approval of the incumbent in the White House. And they open things up so that after the oath is taken and the walk is made from where the oath is taken down to the White House, he just walks in the gate and he walks into his closet and all of his clothes are there and his favorite pens are on his desk. Everything's been taken care of. What Trump is alluding to is he may decide that he's not going anywhere. What's scary to me is Mark Milley, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at this time, the highest ranking military man in the country, has said that he sees no role for the military to play if, in fact, Donald Trump decides not to leave office. That's what scares me, because many of us, me being an old military guy, many of us had looked at the military as the ultimate drop back force to come in and says, hey, Mr. President, it's time for you to go. We're going to abide by the Constitution and we're going to seek the next president. Right. And that they won't get involved. That is scary to me, because now Trump, given that scenario, could unleash Bill Barr to investigate the whole matter. And he won't do anything until Bill Barr comes back with a conclusion. Now, Democrats could, under that scenario, file suit. The Supreme Court gets involved, and now we're back to 2000 again, where the Supreme Court has got to decide whether to allow some type of investigation to go on or to accept what has happened. Very, very scary. We don't know how this may end up.
Well, Val, thanks for making my day terrible. Okay. So let's bring in Dr. McFarlane. I wanted you on, if people haven't seen you on Facebook, you're very upfront. You post what you think, and I want to know what you think. As you listen to Val talk about the possibility that this is going to go in a bad direction, when you talk to people about the importance of voting and getting this guy out or whatever, I have been seeing some people, Black folks, who either say they're not going to vote because they don't like the ticket, or they don't seem to have as much of a problem with Trump as they do with Joe Biden's supposed past and that kind of thing. Tell me what now are you sensing about how this thing is going to go, and then listening to Val. I mean, give me some better news than what Val just told me.
It's going to be hard because I'm still picking my heart up off the floor. That's kind of a chilling scenario that Val just laid out. And I have to say that, like Val, I teach college. I teach a lot of young people. I have, young adults and young adult children of my own. And it's quite a persuasive task to try to let them know that they should vote. They're just not motivated as we like to. And I think the Democratic Party kind of just went back to its old playbook of just getting the least objectionable person to vote for. I mean, you have to look at, can I say anything? I don't know. You said
be as honest as you look. You can say whatever.
It's really hard.
That's why I want you all here for your candor.
Because Joe Biden, he does have it's not that he has a troubled past. It's just that it's just no different than the past. And what we need is something different for the future, if that makes sense. He's been so he has been so in bed with hedge fund operators and large banks and large corporations, and in some ways you wonder if I intend to vote against anyone or anything that's going to get Donald Trump out of office. Let me just say that first. But you do have to think that when let's be optimistic, when Joe Biden wins and he takes office, what's going to happen? Is it going to lull people back to sleep? Are people going to get comfortable again? Are people going to stop asking for criminal justice reform? I don't know. Is he going to be sufficiently moved to make systemic changes? In fact, I think I would submit to you that Joe Biden is even more a paragon of structural status quo than
less so than Trump. I think that's a good point about him being sort of in the box of what you would think as a supporter of business. He's from Delaware, and Delaware corporations have
exactly.
We know
offshore if you have a corporation in Delaware.
Yeah. So I want to remind the folks you're watching The Deal with Ed Clark and Dr. Nicole McFarlane and Val Atkinson. We're just trying to make some sense of what's going to happen with this election, and talking to Dr. McFarlane about how Joe Biden is just sort of running the mill in terms of candidates. But let me come back to you, Dr. McFarlane, and ask you a follow-up on that. So they put Kamala Harris on the ticket. What does that do for what the Democrats are trying to sell here and trying to motivate people to come out? Does Harris, in your opinion, do anything to help that?
Sadly, not much. For me, sure, she's a great pick. I'm glad she picked you picked a Black woman. I would have been happy with Elizabeth Warren, as running mate pick because of the substantive issues that she has brought to the fore, in terms of Black, women's health, and she really kind of brought those things to the fore, reproductive justice, and Kamala Harris she does bring something to the table, but I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but this seems, even despite her being a Howard alumna, despite the fact that she is a AKA and does have deep roots in Washington D.C. Black community. When I talk to sort of your run-of-the-mill, rank-and-file, working class Black women, I ask them what they think of her, and I don't know if anyone else has this experience, but they said, I don't know. I don't trust her. And I wonder where that comes from. And I find myself often having to explain to people that, well, just because she was a prosecutor doesn't mean that she was against Black people. That means, she was probably one of the more progressive and the most progressive prosecutor we had in the country. She made it possible so that she invented things like drug courts, so that people that were convicted or charged with drug crimes did not necessarily have to do jail time, so that they actually got treatment. There were certain things that she did that were extremely progressive and that were ways to avert jail sentencing. And then when I have to explain that to them, they go, oh, okay. But what they're hearing, and what I tend to hear, especially among younger people who are not able to discern, I shouldn't say younger people in general, but just certain people who are less experienced with discerning facts from quote unquote fake news, they have a tendency to, I think what's happening is they're getting bombarded in their news feed with propaganda that lays out as a situation that makes Kamala Harris looked like a Republican mole. I mean,
Right.
that's what they're hearing, and it's like they have this immediately negative reaction, and I'm wondering what's in their news feeds.
Yeah.
We counter that constantly.
Yep. And I think we're going to have to deal with that as we go along. I'm not sure people are able to discern the real history of Kamala Harris from what's been put out in the public sphere by the Republicans. Val, in this time we have in this segment, I want to turn back to you and piggyback off of what been talking with Nicole about. Is this getting excited about the ticket, right? There's always this talk about we're not as excited, this person doesn't move me or whatever, but there's 180,000 dead people. The last I checked, there are riots going on in a lot of places. The economy is horrible. I can look out the window here at the studio where I am today. J.C. Penney's is no more. Lord and Taylor's is no more. I mean, Lord and Taylor's was 200 years old, department store. They filed for bankruptcy this week. They don't exist anymore. And this is all under Donald Trump's watch as president of the United States. And he says that he needs 4 more years to make America great again. How do you square that? Why are we even concerned about, in those people that Dr. McFarlane has talked to who don't seem to be all that ginned up about Harris-Biden, why would they even care if it's a monkey running? I said this before, if orangutan was running, I would vote for the orangutan. I'm not voting for Donald Trump. What is the disconnect? What am I missing, Val?
Well, you're not missing anything, Ed. One of the statements that we use on this show and on our other show quite often is we should be careful that we don't throw away the good in search of the perfect. And some of those people that Nicole was talking about, they're looking for the perfect candidate. They want somebody that's going to do this and somebody that's going to take that. And if candidate A or B doesn't measure up, they're still looking. Well, we have a different type of election this time. Number one, out of the gate is get rid of the incumbent. As you said, even if we have to put an orangutan in there, get rid of the incumbent. And let's not throw away the good in search of the perfect. So that's the first thing. I think Nicole is doing a great job in talking to her people, answering the question about Kamala's being a defense attorney and being a prosecutor, attorney general. She's not perfect. I don't know a whole lot of people who are, but we have to be careful about that because this election is about the business of making sure that incumbent, if you give him 4 more years, God help us all, it's going to be problematic that the perfect candidate could come along in 2024 and he can't run for office. I remind people of one thing. Adolf Hitler was elected. He did not just bum rush in and take over. One of the things he did once he became Führer, he outlawed all of the rest of the parties. So the only party that was left was the Nazi party. So you may not have a government to run for in 2024, folks. If you give this guy 4 more years, the so-called government of the United States is going to be so different than what it is now, your strategies won't work anymore. You may not be able to vote anymore. Some of these media outlets may see that the FCC has pulled their license because they are not following Donald Trump's lead. So it is unbelievable that folks can't see the bottom line. They can't see around the corner to what your actions now may lead to that will affect you and yours down the line. And you can't get caught up in trying to get the perfect right now and end up with nothing. So we've got to tell young folks, and I'm gonna get a little political here, we got to tell all of those so-called Bernie or bust kind of folks who are edging to come over to Biden, saying, well, I don't know, I want to wait and see what he does about this. And He's got to show me this. Now's not the time for that. Maybe at another time. He doesn't have to show you anything.
Right.
Are you telling me that if Biden doesn't show you what you want to be seen, that you're going to vote for Donald Trump or not vote at all? Not voting at all is a vote for Donald Trump if you're a Democrat. So now is not the time for that. And somebody needs to stand up and tell them, hey, get real. Now's not the time for that.
Well, I hear you, Val. So it looks like it's time for us to take a break. I want everybody to stay right here. We're going to come back. Dr. McFarlane is going to come back with us, and Professor Val Atkinson. We're going to continue to talk about this. I want to switch gears, though. So Nicole and Val, think about this. I got on my NBA shirt today. I want to talk about athletes and what their role is in this. We'll be right back after this message.
My voice.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Newman. I am first and foremost a follower of Jesus Christ. I voted for Trump in 2016 primarily because of the pro-life issue. I served in the Trump administration at the Department of Homeland Security and became the Assistant Secretary for Counterterrorism and Threat Prevention. The reason government is supposed to exist is to prepare for external threats like we're seeing with COVID. There were plans put in place for a pandemic. When we started to see that a pandemic was on its way to our shores, experts told me we need to be executing on these plans. But from January until March 11th, what you saw instead was a number of good public servants attempting to do their job and the president telling them to stop because he didn't want the economy to tank and he didn't want a distraction from his campaign. I'm sorry, Mr. President, you were hired to handle America's worst day, and you've absolutely failed. And this year I'll be voting for Joe Biden.
Defending democracy together is responsible for the content.
Just watching the Republican convention, and they're spewing this fear, right? Like, all you hear is Donald Trump and all of them talking about fear. We're the ones getting killed. We're the ones getting shot. We're the ones that we're denied to live in certain communities. We've been hung, we've been shot, and all you do is keep hearing about fear. It's amazing why we keep loving this country, and this country does not love us back.
And welcome back to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark, and it's Saturday, August 29th. I keep looking at that date, Val, and Nicole is like, the whole year has been a wash. I mean, there's been no year. I don't even know what time it is. I don't know what day it is. We're trapped in our houses. Nothing's normal, and then we're still talking about COVID when back in January, Donald Trump said one person had it and it was going to go away. We didn't have to worry about it. There was no such thing as George Floyd. We didn't know who he was, back in January, and now we're here on August 29th. Nicole McFarlane, and the other night the NBA just ceased their whole playoffs, and players were walking out. Even Kenny Smith, one of the folks that was at Carolina when I was there, he walked off the set of the NBA pregame show because, we're just fed up. And I want to talk to you and Val, and I'll start with you, Nicole. I want to talk to you and Val about what role the NBA can play in advancing this discussion. Doc Rivers was very eloquent in coming back in. You guys didn't see this, but coming back in, we played a clip of Doc Rivers saying, we continue to love America, but America doesn't seem to love us. Dr. McFarlane, talk to me about how these athletes may be able to advance this issue, or will there be some backlash at some point? I know there was some when Bubba Wallace, who was one of the few drivers in NASCAR, seemed to get support from the other drivers after the Confederate flag was removed from NASCAR. There was a little bit of backlash against NASCAR, but it seemed to have settled down. What do you think is going to happen with this thing with the NBA?
Well, I think, well, I want to first go to the idea of like what the NBA can do to change this issue, but also what the WNBA has also been doing with this, right? The WNBA has had a very major part in play in advancing the cause of Black Lives Matter. And I think in some ways they actually led the way for the NBA to feel more comfortable with doing that. I think the WNBA has been very outspoken. As far as the NBA and backlash, I think that, what was Laura Ingram's shut up and dribble statement? I think that's still just pretty, I think that still marks the major response. I think that Americans, white Americans, I'll put white in brackets, right? They really, I think they are already tired of Black Lives Matter. You look at a place like big, maybe sports towns like Chicago, Wisconsin, Michigan, cities like, states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin. What they're finding is that support for Black Lives Matter is already going down to like 48-48. It was like 60% approval back in June. And now we have here in the beginning of September, it's gone down to like 40, 60, 40, 50-50 approval ratings. And I think that sometimes when I think about places like Wisconsin, I think about, or those kinds of states, those so-called flyover states, I think about sports fans. Maybe I'm stereotyping them. And I think that they are already losing patience for it. And I think it's not, in terms of the white, masculine mindset, this sort of, voter that Trump really is his base. I don't think that we had a lot of room for wiggling anyway, with a lot of wiggle room to get them on our side. And I think that if anything, the WNBA walkout is really kind of just annoying them even more, because now they can't just go and forget what, turn on the television and forget the news, because now they're reminded of it every time they try to watch sports. They're reminded of what's going on in the news. And so they see Black players as another target of their annoyance or irritation. And I think that is a huge problem when it comes down to questions of like white backlash. It's an expectation. It's the norm. It is what happens every time you have Black advancement. You have white backlash. That is just the pattern of things. A given,
yeah. Hey, well, Val, let me drag you into this. You're sitting there watching Charles Barkley and Shaq and all of. They're always yucking it up, and it's a fun thing. But the other night it turned into very serious, and Kenny Smith walked off the set of NBA Live. I could feel the emotion. We heard what Doc Rivers said and all that, and Dr. McFarlane's right. Even though the players really feel it, they want to talk about it or whatever, there is some white resentment. And what is that ultimately going to do if the resentment is too much and becomes not just something we know about, but they start acting on by not supporting, the NBA, and then or by just not buying the jerseys and not just turning it off altogether. Is there a law of diminishing return here, where you can talk about it, the players can talk about their emotions and all that stuff, but then white people just turn off altogether? Are we approaching that precipice? Are we going to fall off that cliff at some point?
I don't know about falling off the cliff, Ed, but we definitely are approaching that. It's not a straight linear piece where we can just continually go on this continuum as long as we want and nothing's going to happen. There is a point that a substantial number of white citizens will consider it overkill and will say that they've had enough. I'm hoping personally that if it gets to that point, it's after November 3rd, because if it's before that time, the Trump campaign will definitely use it as an issue. And he will be saying, this is what I've been telling you is going to happen if you don't protect yourself. He has been about the business of, in 16, what he did, let me step back, he used dog whistles to let people know that your culture, your status as a white person in this country is at stake in this election. That's what he used. That's what they heard. There was a lot of other surface information going on, but underneath it all, that was the dog whistle that was going on. He's put away the dog whistle and he's got a megaphone out now. And he's just saying it out loud. You're going to lose not only your culture, you're going to lose Western civilization. That's what they're after. They are after taking you and putting you on the bottom rung of the American caste system. You're going to be a Dalit. That's what you're going to be. You're going to be an untouchable, as the black man is now. You're going to trade places with him. And a lot of people are beginning to listen to that. That's when, in 2016, white people who voted for Obama in 8 and 12 told you that they were voting for Trump in 16 because of the economy. Well, that's the excuse they gave you because they heard the dog whistle. And now they don't have to give you an excuse. They can just vote for Donald Trump because they feel that the culture, the society, all of Western civilization is at stake. That, I hate to be the purveyor of bad news, but we've got to face reality, folks. We've got to get out of this bubble of good thinking, of happy thinking. And we've got to face reality if we want to mount a strategy to take back the White House and do the right thing about this country. I want to say one other thing here on an issue that I didn't get a chance to comment on earlier. When you're talking about Joe Biden and Harris and what they're going to do or what they can do. I hearken back to 2009 when 59% of the House was Democratic. We had 60 US senators caucusing with us as Democrats. We had a Democrat in the White House who happened to have been an African American. And we didn't get things done. What else is it going to take? What we did is we reached across the aisle and asked Republicans, what do you want? And they said, okay, first of all, single payer is off the table. We don't want no health care plan that's got single payer attached to it. And we said, okay. And next thing, we don't want you negotiating about prices for pharmaceuticals. Okay. So what is going to be the difference this time? Are we going to get the House, keep the House, take back the Senate, get the presidency, and then reach across the aisle again and see what the Republicans want to do? Because if they do that, we've wasted a lot of opportunity and time. And if they do that, I guarantee you Joe Biden will be a one-term president because you'll have a lot of people that won't support him again going down this road. He's got to go in and do something. Top on my list, Ed, and I'll shut up when I say this, is not to just see that the things that happened under the Trump administration doesn't happen anymore by putting roadblocks in. That ain't enough. I want to know, what are they going to do to undo those things, such as the 200 federal judges that McConnell put on the bench at the district, the appellate, and Supreme Court level that have lifetime appointments. I can't stand that. You're talking about 30, 40, 50 years of conservative judges that we got to live with and we can do nothing about. And some of them were placed in their positions illegally, and we can't use the law legally to do anything about that. Those are the kind of things, they're going to be tough questions for these guys. You're not going to just say, okay, we got the presidency now, we got two of the three branches of government, so let's just go back to normal. Nope, we're not going back to normal. Normal is where all my problems began. Normal is what I'm trying to escape from. I ain't going with you back to normal, okay? You go back there if you want to, but that is the seat and root of all of my problems. So we need to go to a different place.
Yeah.
That both of us can go to together.
I hear you, and that's the argument I try to make with folks all the time, Val. I want to remind the folks you're watching The Deal with Ed Clark and Val Atkinson, Professor Val Atkinson, and Professor Nicole McFarlane from Fayetteville State University has been nice enough to come and join us with our shenanigans today. Dr. McFarlane, you teach, among other things, English. And a lot of this is about language, right? About how we describe things and how things get described to people, the words that we use, so on and so forth. You can't just come out and say, I don't want niggas in my neighborhood. When in fact, that's what you mean when he says that he does not want the suburbs to go away. He's actually saying, I do not want niggas in my neighborhood. That's one of the things he's saying. The other thing he's saying is, alluding to what Val was talking about, is you will become a mongrel nation, which is what Strom Thurmond used to say and the Klan used to say. But he's saying that the civilization will be turned upside down and it won't be America anymore. And what he's really saying is you don't want a mongrel nation, which is what the Klan used to say out loud. Let's talk about the speech that's going on right now and how people are saying things. It's pretty clear, that like Val said, you start with dog whistles and then you get as strong as you can. How far are we away from somebody actually saying what I just said, that we don't want niggas in our neighborhood? Polite white people are not going to say that. They're going to say they want to maintain their schools. What do you think about in terms of how the language is right now around these issues?
Well, I think the language is getting about as explicit as it can be right about now. Well, you even look at, when I think about language, I think about how something can be said, and then and the most effective persuasive messages are those that register at different levels and register different levels for different audiences. So you could say one thing, and for one audience, it means another. This is what's called networked arguments, right? And it's often kind of language that you use in like public policy. So if you say, what's a good public policy? Val, if you can help me, just throw out a public policy statement.
School choice.
School choice, right. So of course, school choice, it means everything to everybody, and therefore meaning absolutely nothing at the end of the day, right? So this is a perfect example of that. And so when you say things like, but then if you look at some of the specific slogans, right, of the alt-right and even the QAnon, when they start talking about child human trafficking, right? Like, what does that mean, right? Are you talking about Epstein? Are you talking about like Africa? Are you talking about, so they can always hide and say, well, I'm not racist because I'm against child human trafficking. So they can hide behind that, or they have another thing. I think one of the more interesting phrases or slogans that was out there is "You will not replace us," and I think that speaks to what Val was saying in terms of the inverted power dynamic that white people perceive, that there's going to be a flipping upside down of power, like suddenly, like Terry Crews says, black supremacy is going to be a thing, right? But which is not a thing, of course, but the idea that you will not replace us is really, is flipping on its head the idea, not that you will not replace us, and it's not like saying that you're going to replace, you are going to take our place. It's saying that you will not take those people and replace us with them. So really what it is it resonates at a much deeper level, because it's not just saying Latin immigrants won't replace us, or black workers won't replace us, or women won't replace us, or gay people won't replace us. Saying you Jews will not replace us with those people.
Replace us. You will not replace us.
So here the idea is that generally when you have this this idea that you will not replace us. When you ever have this concept that in white supremacy, once they start coming after Jewish people, I think all bets are off. That means everything's on the table, and they're now explicitly coming up with these anti-Semitic tropes like cannibalism and child rape and kidnapping. And these are old tropes that go back to the early, before the Middle Ages. And so I think that there has to be some sort of understanding of what these tropes mean, because I think at the level of anti-Jewishness, anti-Semitic tropes, that there is simply, there's still a level of dog whistle occurring. But when they're talking about Black people, and they're talking about Latinx people, they're just right out there with it. They have no, there is a bullhorn. And I think that we have to become more savvy interlocutors when understanding the history of these tropes and the context in which they're used. And I think a lot of it is like a lot of context has been lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's no subtlety when it comes to Black folks, but there's still some with certain other folks. We're gonna. Time is flying. We're running up to another break that I want to take in just a minute. But before we do that, I did want to hop back to Val real quick. Val, like I said, they said "Make America Great Again" at the Republican convention. I was just stunned that they thought that was okay. That language of so what happened to the greatness that they supposedly bought us, right? That they need to make it great again, and as if that Donald Trump is not the president, as if Joe Biden somehow is responsible for all the stuff that's wrong right now. Is the assumption that we're just that stupid and we're going to buy right into that? Or is it that they're just trying whatever they can with their language, trying to find something that resonates with people?
I think they're just trying to find something that resonates. They go back to their first initial victory. I'm talking Donald Trump right now. And that was in the Republican primary. And he never talked about himself for more than a few seconds. He always talked about the evils of his opponent and what they didn't have and what they couldn't do and how stupid they were and this, that, and the other. And the media picked right up on it. And instead of interviewing candidate X, they would start off with, well, Donald Trump says this about you. What's your response? And I thought that was really unfair. And Donald Trump, if he doesn't know anything, he knows the media. And he played the media like a fiddle in that primary and in the general election. He spent almost none of his money. He had the media to carry his message. And he's trying to do the same thing right now. His problem is that everybody's a little smarter than they were 4 years ago. The media is a little more savvy, and he's having problems. The same things that worked 4 years ago aren't working right now at all. And that's why he's so far down in the polls. And as far as my prediction is concerned, if anybody wants it out, he doesn't have enough time to catch up.
Well, that's a good place for us to take a break. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to wrap up with Dr. Nicole McFarlane and Val Atkinson. I want to go to Kenosha, Wisconsin. I want to talk about what's going on there, what we see is that likely outcome there, maybe revisit it, Minneapolis a little bit, and just talk about the continuing, sort of disconnect with what police reform really should look like, as opposed to what's being portrayed in the media as defunding the police, what real reform would look like. So we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. You're watching The Deal with Ed Clark.
More than 20 million Americans are out of work, struggling to make ends meet. But Trump says,
today is probably, if you think of it, the greatest comeback in American history.
Trump's botched handling of the coronavirus pandemic cost jobs, and the unemployment rate is still at historic levels. Donald Trump either doesn't know what's going on or he just doesn't care.
And welcome back to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It's Saturday, August 29th, 2020. Another weird week has gone by. We were just talking about, before we took the break, this whole notion of make America great again, which is really weird to say, but that seems to be the Republican slogan going into this last 68 days before the election. And in the break, we were talking off mic, and Dr. Nicole McFarlane, brought up some very interesting points about why it is that they can say that with a straight face. Dr. McFarlane, let me bring you back in here. Talk to me about how white folks are afraid of losing control, and how that plays into a statement like "Make America Great Again." How do you see those things being connected?
Yeah, I think that when they say "Make America Great Again," of course they had to use the dog whistles, and now they're using, as Val said, the bull, the bullhorn,
Megaphone. Yeah.
and so the megaphone. And I think that what they're saying when they say "Make America Great Again" is that they haven't done a good enough job eradicating opposing voices. Because often with the liberal ideology, and if you think about the Democratic Party swinging to the liberal end of the political ideological spectrum, it's really about allowing a free flow of voices and opinions, and maybe even a hierarchy and a meritocracy of ideas flourish, right? But with the right, with a far right conservative agenda, the idea really isn't about letting a free flow of ideas going, because first of all, that goes against God, right? That goes against the authoritarian ideas. I mean, in the conservative mind, what that conceptualization of God is. And so that free flowing idea is really a challenge to ultimate and good and right authority. So what they really want to do is just eradicate ideas that oppose that. And so when they hear ideas like, and when they say things like "Make America Great Again" means like they have lost footing simply because things have become more equal. And when you are an oppressor, equality feels like oppression, right? So just being equal feels like you're being oppressed, and just the idea of having a level playing field feels like losing ground. So I think that there's even, that's why I think that's where the, even the liberal white people who think well of themselves, I think that is a very persuasive tactic for them to make them feel like, well, aren't you losing ground? Well, aren't you kind of sick of that black woman telling you what to do at work? And aren't you kind of sick of them, them challenging you? And aren't you kind of sick of your neighbor next door and her loud kids? And aren't you kind of, and do you really think you should have to wait in line for this woman to finish what she's doing before you go? I mean, it's kind of just like that feeling of like having to share public facilities and public accommodations equitably feels as though they're losing ground, and they feel as though, I think there's a sense, because we do have a very durable caste system in this country, and this caste system is like black and white, and you may have an upper class within the lower caste, and you may have a lower class within the upper caste, but at the end of the day, that is a binary system, and anything that feels equal feels like a loss of ground.
Well, that's a mouthful, because that is exactly, what we've been talking about. I think, Val, for the 30 years I've been knowing you, is this stratification that we have, and that sort of in this capitalist system, you have to have these people who fit into the very bottom to support what they want to do up top. You also have to have the stratification to delineate who is not only the authority, but who is the culture, right? That white, Christian, evangelical, flag-waving American is what we should all aspire to, anything else other than that is problematic for them. So equality would mean that I could also put up my red, black, and green flag with a black power fist on it at my house. But if they see that, then there's something wrong with that. That is antithetical to Americanism, right? So Val, then let's go to Kenosha, Wisconsin. Then we know what's going on there. We talked about it at the beginning of the show. A man is shot 7 times in the back. Let's not even talk about what preceded that. Let's talk about what's happened since it's happened. At one point, he was shackled to his bed, totally paralyzed in the hospital. Apparently, that's not the case now. Afterwards, there's a young white male whose mom drives him from Illinois to Wisconsin with a gun. He goes to protect property, ends up killing 2 white people and injuring another who was at the protest. He walks away, goes home, takes a shower, and is allowed to turn himself in, and so on and so forth. I say all that to say is we're right back to where we are with this unequalness on display, on full display, that you see all these videos all the time of white people fighting the police, talking back to the police, all kind of things over real criminal offenses. And then black people, where there's perceived criminality, not obeying a police officer, they end up dead. Sandra Bland is dead because she didn't signal. Val, how do we get out of this? Or are we destined, because it's not that many black people when you think about it. Most white people don't know any black people, really, other than the ones they see on TV and other than the tropes that they know. How do we move the ball here if white people don't do it? Because black people, I don't think, can do it.
Unfortunately, Ed, there's no paradigm to follow. There's no path already lit so that we can find our way. We are the originators of a new model here. We have to do it. I'm an old Western guy. I love Western movies. And I look back at all of the Western movies. It's a little harder watching them now than it used to be. But I look at some of them, and most of them are right after the Civil War. When the cavalry, after the Civil War is over, the cavalry had to find a job. Their job was to take care of what they call the Indian problem. And the Indian problem meant, okay, pushing these guys onto reservation. If we find out there's gold on that reservation, getting them off that reservation and putting them in another place. And you could kill them with impunity. I just shot one. He just happened to be that way. And that's the same way a lot of these police officers are trying to go in and manage the black communities that they are sworn to protect and defend. They see this community that they are sworn to protect and defend as the enemy. These are the new Indians. We got to keep them straight. We have got to make them afraid of us. When we roll up on the mini mark and they're standing outside smoking cigarettes and drinking their 40s, we want them to shake in their boots. When we get out, they should take the prone position on the concrete with their hands behind them and speak to us as though we are military officers. Every sentence begins with and ends with the word, sir. If you do that, then maybe they are showing that they have respect. And the worst thing you can do to an officer is to show disrespect, because you are already on the bottom rung of this caste system. And he's on the top rung of the caste system, plus he has a gun and a badge. And you are not going to respect him. He gives you a command and you refuse to obey that command. Even silly commands like, look at me when I talk to you, put that cigarette out, turn your head this way. You have to obey that, because the penalty may be death if you don't obey those commands. So when they come up into our communities, Ed, We know what the consequences are. So sometimes we are placed in positions that we have a choice to make to adhere to what the officer is saying and live, or maintain our dignity and die. And I listened to a lot of the NBA players over the weekend talk, and some of them even reduced to tears about what the talk that they have to have with their sons about how to make sure you come back home. And the summary that I got, it meant that you almost have to give up your dignity to make sure and forget about the law and to make sure you can come back to your family. And that's basically what some of these police officers want. They want that authority over you, and then they feel good about it. Ta-Nehisi Coates was on TV this morning, and somebody asked him about this same question. And he says, look, a lot of police officers, police chiefs and everything, first thing they'll tell you is that not all police officers are bad. It's just a couple rotten apples and we need to root them out. He said, if I'm in a restaurant and a rat runs across the floor, I don't want the maitre d' to tell me that we don't have rats every day. And I thought that was a real good example of what these guys are talking about, that all police officers aren't bad. It only takes one to pull a trick and end my life. I don't care if the other 99 are good guys. I want you to root that one guy out. And that's what they're not doing. And that's where the attention needs to be. And the pressure point has to be police unions. It has to be the municipal elected officials that make contracts with these police unions. And voters have sway over those elected officials. So we got to change and stop letting the police unions run the police departments and turn that back over to the sheriffs, the police chiefs, and the elected officials that put them in office.
Yeah, Val, look, we're coming up to the end of the time here, and solutions is what we ultimately need to talk about. Like I said, making those changes with those contracts with the police unions and not allowing them to run everything. In the time we got left, I've been doing something a little bit different at the end of the show, Dr. McFarlane. I've been asking people to tell me something good. What I have to look forward to in the coming week that's going to make me feel better about all this bullshit that we've been talking about for the last hour. Give me something good to think about. What do I need to be hopeful about going forward this week?
Well, I think we have something to be hopeful about is just the fact that this reckoning is an ongoing process. To piggyback on what Val said, I think there's something much more visceral happening. I just want to say this though, when we think about these NBA players talking about having given give their sons the talk, right? And how painful that is. But I think there's something even more visceral happening. I think what's not said is that these are grown men in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s who are still reduced to being like children when they're having to interact with cops. And I think that's what they're not saying. I think a lot of that is the masculine, maybe a male ego, but I think as a Black woman who loves Black men, who has Black sons, I think that what I hear is them saying, like, it's not really just them having the talk, but them having to have that talk to themselves every time they encounter a cop, that here I am, a grown man with a, better educated, make more money, than this cop, this white cop, but then I have to reduce myself and diminish myself in some way. And then now I have to talk to this as though I am a child to this other grown man. Mm-hmm. I think that's a huge part. And I think that's the part that's not being talked about, is that it's not just little young Black men this is happening to. Remember, George Floyd was well into his 40s. Okay. So that's never been, ask any of my students, they'll tell you that's old. Okay. That is not young. But what do I have to feel good about? What we have good to feel about is that at least the election is right around the corner. Early elections, early voting starts in a few weeks. I'm going to tell my students that it is time to vote. I don't care. Listen, you don't have to fall in love. You don't have to love the person you vote for. That was an aberration. When we fell in love with Barack Obama, that was a complete historical aberration. That never happens. When I was a kid, when I was 18, when I was 20, when I was in my 30s, I held my nose and I pulled the lever. You didn't like the person you voted for. In fact, it was more likely that you wouldn't like them because you didn't have to like them. You just had to make sure they didn't burn down the company store once they got into office. And so that's what I want to tell people, that it's early voting, and we're going to get this vote out any way we can and let these students know that it's, and these young people, because that young vote, that young Black vote is going to be so important. And we really have to get them out there to know that it's time to vote. And also because maybe their immune systems are good and strong and healthy. And maybe we can even convince some of them to be poll workers.
There you go. There you go. Well, Val, same question for you. What do I got to look forward to this week?
Well, the NBA players have been successful at convincing some of the owners to open up their facilities. I'm talking about these mega stadiums and dome stadiums to serve as voting polls, voting booths, to serve as places to go that people can stand inside, outside of inclement weather, and so that the long lines won't bother them as much. The more owners do that, the better. This is one of the things that the owner can do. There are two or three already on record saying that they're going to open their facility up to the Board of Elections to set up voting facilities in those particular stadiums. And I think that is super. That is so good to minimize one issue that we could have working against us on election day.
Well, there you go. So I think this has been a great hour, folks. I want to thank Dr. Nicole McFarlane for coming back in and joining us. And as always, Val Atkinson. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, you can always go to thedealwithedclark.com. My piece this week was about Kenosha, Wisconsin, and just sort of the visceral feeling I had by seeing another Black man shot. I'd like for you to read that. Please share the deal with edclark.com with other folks. There's at least one piece out there every week, and sometimes two or more. There's all the past videos. Val, we had Nolan Smith, the assistant basketball coach from Duke, a few weeks ago, who was talking about his own experience of being stopped by the police in Durham. Here's a guy who was an NBA, so a college basketball All-American star, was in the NBA, came back to Durham, driving around in a nice car, and gets harassed by the cops until they realize he's an NBA star, and then they want to be his best friend. So he was on recently, and I'd like for you guys to check out that interview with Nolan Smith, who is a friend of the program and the whole Duke family. Even though I give Duke a lot of grief, the Duke folks have been good to us, Val, over the years. So. And Dr. McFarlane, are you working on anything interesting, or you got any projects going on that we need to know about, or how can we find you out on the web and stuff like that?
I'm working with some projects in terms of developing our media making center at Fayetteville State University, and something called the Black English and Applied Media Project. I'm also working with capturingthecrisis.wordpress.com is our blog for my digital rhetoric students. We're writing on thinking about this very issue, and it's called Capturing the Crisis. So we're talking about the crisis right now in the country with Black Lives Matter and the coronavirus. And right now I'm really focusing on teaching right now, and I'm refocusing on teaching because teaching has been such a challenge right now. So I'm really rededicating myself to that right now. So.
There you go. And Val, what are you working on this week, and what do you want us to know about?
Well, as usual, we have a VEEP program, stands for Voter Education and Preparation. It's a consortium between Radio One, our radio station, and the Durham alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, which happens to be my fraternity. And I would ask a quiz of both of you before I let you go. What do Arthur Ashe, Elgin Baylor, Bill Russell, and Wilt Chamberlain, and also Colin Kaepernick have in common?
I know they all Kappas because that's the only thing that's the only answer it could be.
Well, they all protested in their own way. Also, Oscar Robertson's on that list. They all protested in their own way, using their sport to protest social injustices, all through out and down history. And they just all happen to be members of the great fraternity of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity.
I figured you'd get that in. Well, folks, again, thanks so much for being with us on The Deal. We'll see you next Saturday. In the meantime, check out Dr. Nicole McFarlane. We'll put a link to how to get in touch with her. Next Sunday, join me and Val on Connections on WFXC and WFXK in the Raleigh-Durham market. It's also streams online at foxync.com. So have a good week. Like I always tell you to do, go out and do something good for somebody during the week. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching The Deal. Bye.